Andy Chrisman of For Him has spent 40 plus years in Christian music, and chances are he knows your favorite artist personally. Now he's bringing you their stories.
I'm Andy Chrisman.
In his new podcast, 1 Degree of Andy, he sits down with the voices behind the songs for real, honest, and faith-filled conversations you won't hear anywhere else.
That's a great question.
If you love Christian music, this is your backstage pass.
The 1 Degree of Andy podcast.
Listen now to 1 Degree of Andy wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation, as usual, as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about.
Well, hi, everyone. I am Lori LeBay, your host of Alzheimer's Speaks. And today we're going to be talking about the hardest moments to care. And we know we have a lot of those and how we can do better. I'm thrilled we have Ana Gracia with us, who is the founder of Dementia Aide. But before I introduce her to you, I always like to give a shout out to Q for Good, who's my webmaster, who I absolutely adore. And I know that that can be a trigger point for a lot of people. So if you are struggling with a website and you want someone who knows what they're doing, will be on time, and is affordable, check out Q for Good. And while you're scrolling the internet, go to Alzheimer's Speaks and check out all of our free educational resources, as well as our sister company, Dementia Map, which has over 150 categories that you can search. So with no further ado, let's go and talk to Ana. So I'm so excited to have you on the show today. I think what you're doing is fabulous, but I'm going to have you go ahead and introduce yourself to your audience, because you can do a better job than me.
Aw, thanks, Lori. So my name is Ana Gracia, and I founded a company called Dementia Aide many years ago. And Dementia Aide, I created it because my dad suffered from frontotemporal lobe dementia for over 15 years. And he was diagnosed with it when I was in my early teens. And so basically I grew up with dementia being the center point of my entire family for a very, very long time. He did pass away in 2020, but walking that journey with him, I really saw a lot of things that hit my heart so strongly that I just felt compelled, like I needed to create a community and a space for people like our family, and to find a way to help in any way possible. So I'm really excited to talk to you today and to just share a little bit about my journey and to connect with you more deeply.
Okay. Well, why don't we talk a little bit more about your journey? So you said it started when you were like 15 is when he got diagnosed?
Yeah, so his formal diagnosis came when I was 18, but he was showing symptoms long before that. So I have memories from as early as, 13 years old, where something was off with dad and we didn't have a language for it. And I think there was just a long time for things to build up to the point where it was undeniable and we had to do something about it. So it did take us a while to actually get a formal diagnosis. And back then, frontotemporal lobe wasn't as known as it is now. So he was also so young. He was in his mid 40s. And so they would take one look at him and be like, oh, he's depressed, or they would diagnose him as like, maybe there's something going on. Or my grandpa had just passed away, who he was really close to. So we were like, maybe he's just really struggling emotionally with these things. My parents also had 6 kids, so I'm one of 6 siblings. And, there was just a lot going on. So I think it took us a really long time to really get to the point where the symptoms were so severe, where he wasn't able to work anymore, and where he was showing signs of something larger.
Wow, that's a lot at a young age, and the misdiagnosis is so common. I was just talking with someone else and saying, a lot of times, it's go see the psychiatrist, before they go see a neurologist. Because, and again, when you get the whole age thing in there, they just can't, the doctors, most of them just aren't educated at how soon it can hit. And I mean, we're seeing now, and not super common, but even some kids getting diagnosed with various types of dementia and stuff. So, we've really got to change our mindset of what the possibilities are and what that means to the person as well as the family. Because like you said, all of a sudden he couldn't work. I mean, that's huge. You got 6 kids and, you can't work anymore. And there's really not help for younger onset out there, which I know they've been fighting for. But yeah, that's pretty traumatic and has an impact that there's no way it can't trickle down to the whole family.
Absolutely. It really stopped our lives. I think part of what led to the challenges in the beginning were, he didn't know that anything was wrong with him.
Mm-hmm.
So you would talk to him and be like, oh, I'm just feeling a little bit of something in my brain. But I think that also, that lack of awareness, and we know there's language for that now, but looking back, it's so obvious. But when you're in it and you're just a caretaker and you're loving on someone, it's not as obvious. We also had an additional complication, which is my dad's first language was Spanish. And we were living in Florida, and it was hard to find the right physician or the right person who could actually diagnose him to begin with, because they didn't have the resources to kind of handle him. So we actually had to have him go back to his home country of Colombia to get diagnosed. Then he also ended up going to France because I have an aunt in France that's a doctor who tried to help get a diagnosis there. So that also just extended kind of this period of, we don't really have a word for what's happening. We know something's wrong. And it was like a 2 or 3 year journey just to get the diagnosis alone. Fortunately, we did get it, and that kind of kicked into gear, like the change in mindset and the acceptance of like what's actually our reality and how are we going to navigate this as a family. And I always think back to just how fortunate my dad was that he had a loving family who was going to do the absolute extreme version of what was possible to get him whatever he needed. And like, we're very passionate, emotional people who, even with the toughest of circumstances, we're going to like find a way to like, overcome that mountain. But many people don't have that. And a lot of people are alone. And that's where a lot of the understanding of just how severe this disease is and how it affects these families that have no resources and don't have any support really moved me in a direction where like, this isn't something I can just live through and kind of move on and grieve and okay, my dad passed. It was like, no, like I have to do something about it. And that's when I started with Dementia Aide of just like, okay, I don't know what it is I'm gonna do, but I have to spend some energy here and like listen to what has become my calling of just trying to help people navigate this journey.
Wow. I kind of felt the same way with my mom. It's like, where's the services, products, and tools? I mean, there's got to be some hope out here. And you're right with your family. I mean, even just to have the resources to send them back to Colombia or over to France. I mean, a lot of people, that's just not even an option, or they wouldn't even have thought of that. They would have thought, well, no, our system is here and there's got to be something here. And you would think in Florida there would be something, but yeah, it's difficult. And even with the testing, if somebody's first language is different, the testing gets much more complicated too, I believe, in terms of interpretation. I hear that from people all the time. Well, the test really wasn't appropriate, didn't really make sense to us, or that would not be a normal answer for us. And hopefully that'll change over time, but so far it really hasn't. There's still kind of the standard tests that everyone's going with. So what kind of gaps were you finding other than trying to get diagnosed that made you decide to, create Dementia Aide? And from that, what is Dementia Aide? What does it offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dementia Aide is effectively a products and services and most importantly, a community. So I started it with just seeing what was out there on social media, kind of sharing my story and posting about other people that were doing it. I was doing this as a side hobby. I always had a full-time job to help support our family. That was one of the biggest things for my dad's kids was we just needed to help provide for the family. So really the most lucrative jobs, and I had a career in finance for over 15 years, and that's how I could help support my mom and my siblings and my dad as we were navigating this moment in our lives. And so I started it with just sharing on Instagram, like other people, what they were sharing and like a little bit about me. But I wasn't in a place emotionally yet where I could share my own personal story because I was so in it and we were so deep with dad. But then eventually I landed on what I wanted to be my first product, which is still the only product that I really sell right now, which is an adaptive jumpsuit designed specifically for the transitions to incontinence or when dressing is really challenging and you're struggling with undressing with your loved one. That was a practical thing that happened in dad's care journey that was nobody warns you for what it looks like when your loved one is transitioning to incontinence. And when you asked me about the gaps, really like the practical support of the daily care and how difficult things that we take for granted of just like going to the restroom, taking a shower, of, how to stay safe in the home and being able to go outside and go in a garden safely and those types of things snowball into dangerous activities, which can come with severe consequences if you don't have the right things in place. And nobody's there to kind of hold your hand and be like, hey, Lori, like, have you tried this very easy technique of like how to get your loved one to comfortably go into the shower? So that was the biggest thing that I saw was just the daily care and the challenges and how much of a struggle it was and how undignified it felt for the person with dementia. And you are so emotionally overwhelmed with like, how do I provide the best care as possible and make sure my dad is dignified, make sure that he's cared for and that he's safe, but also managing like the emotional frustrations of trying to dress a 200-pound man who was a cowboy and is fighting me and is aggressive. And those are situations that nobody tells you they're going to happen, but they are so common and pervasive in dementia care. So Dementia Aide strives to be really practical information, and I do have educational content as well on the website. So it's a place of not only community but also educational resources. I post about things that I feel are important for people to know. Like, for example, like what's it like to travel with someone with dementia, right? Our worlds become so small as caregivers, and for the person with dementia, it's like how do we maintain dignity with practical tools and information to get us through these really, really challenging moments. And then emotional support. So one of the things I'm doing actively right now is actually just talking to caregivers and like doing these interviews where I'm understanding like more deeply because we all have it's a one-on-one experience. Like we're all going through this dementia journey, but each family, each person, each caregiver, each situation is a one-on-one. And each situation requires a different set of handbooks that don't exist and this level of personalization. So that's basically it in a nutshell. And my goal is to really focus on practical products that change caregiving and make it a lot more dignified for the person with the dementia, but are also um, easing the burden of care for the caregivers.
You said a few things there that I want to mention. And one question I have for you is you had mentioned kind of daily living tasks, but do you think it's just tasks or do you think it's mindset as well in terms of how to do those tasks?
Oh my goodness. I mean, if you mindset frames everything, right? I think about there's a caregiver I just spoke to yesterday who, for example, is still, even though their loved one has had dementia for over 2 years, they're still in denial that the disease is real, right? And so for them, they're still hoping that tomorrow their loved one is going to wake up and they're going to come back to them, right? So having the frame set and the mindset of like, we're on this journey and the dementia is a disease and we're accompanying this person, and it drives everything, right? And it also is a shift in identity of the caregiver, right? There's so much of the caregiving journey that we ourselves as caretakers, right? There's so much shame, there's so much judgment, there's so much that we're, oh, like, don't tell the neighbor because they're going to think my person is crazy, or all these things that are holding us back of really being able to also just meet the moment and appreciate these little moments that we have with our people that we still have, of how to bring joy and how to like be able to do a really difficult thing, but also see it in the best light as possible. And yeah, I don't think without the right viewpoint, I think it could be a lot harder. And, that's part of the caregiving journey, absolutely. So they're definitely not tasks. It's so much of like the empathy and what we're also learning to mold ourselves into as caregivers, to be more empathetic and to lead with love and to lead with support, as well as also learning how to put our boundaries, right? Of like self-care and how do we take care of ourselves in these really difficult moments? How do we not stop our lives from, we have to continue our careers, we have to continue our families, we also have to move in a positive direction. So, and I think that's part of the challenge of there's just so much happening at the same time, and we're constantly making decisions as caregivers. So, if I can help just one person be able to navigate that a little bit more smoothly, then I've done my job and served my purpose.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Yeah, I think a lot of times caregivers think, well, just tell me how to do it. But it's way more than just, step A, step B, step C. It's really about that emotional base, that empathy, that the approach, the style, the timing, all of that stuff comes into play. And that's what I like what you're doing, is you're talking real life situations. It's not a textbook. Well, what if this happens? It's like, no, this does happen. And knowing too that the reactions could vary, it might work 1 second, it might not work the next. I mean, that's what I've found a lot anyways. And so it's really important to kind of build that toolkit. And I think also letting people know it's okay to try something different. And if it doesn't work, it's not that you failed, it's that you tried because you love them, and you're trying to take care of them. And because none of us have all the answers that are going to be perfect for everyone. Or are going to work. So I think that's really important. The other thing I wanted to mention, because I don't know if you're aware of this, when you talked about travel can be really interesting. If you're going to the gas station or the bank, or you're going to Europe, it doesn't make any difference. You don't always know what to expect depending on the type of disease and where they are in the process. And there is on Alzheimer's Speaks, under our free educational resources, under dementia-friendly communities, there's a section towards the bottom on travel with different tips and stuff. And it gets probably a little bit more heavy into airport travel and what to expect there. But it will also lead you to another group, and I feel awful because I can't remember the name of it, but it was started here in Minnesota. But they have kind of tips and tricks for lots of different things regarding travel, because that that can be very interesting. I don't know about you, but I ended up always having a bag of extra clothes in the car and stuff,
Oh,
just in case, just that just in case bag.
absolutely. And I wish that as a community, right, because it is such a difficult bag of unknowns, that we make our world smaller. We make our loved ones' worlds smaller. We got to stay at home. We need to be safe. And so much of it is also shame. I had one moment when I went to, I'm this young 22-year-old and I just graduated college and I'm helping care for dad. And we went to Staples and I just needed to pick something up. And I'm like, Dad, let's go. And this was when he was starting his incontinence journey. And my dad was a handsome, beautiful looking, 50-year-old at this time who looks completely normal, but he is not normal, right? Like I could not let his hand go because he would like go grab everything and go touch everything, which like, of course he would. He's at the store with like beautiful colors everywhere. Of course he wants to touch everything, right? And I'll never forget this just moment of panic where I'm like, these people have no clue that they're looking at him. He's speaking gibberish. He can no longer form sentences, but he looks fine. He's walking fine. He looks physically totally okay. And just that moment of like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I need to run to the restroom and I'm going into the restroom with this older man, right, who looks normal, and just this sheer panic of shame as well. Like I have to own it. I was like, oh gosh, like what are people gonna think? And it's like, no, Anna, like you're doing the best that you can. And there's so many communities like what you just described where you've got resources. There's also like the hidden disabilities program for airports, or like sensory rooms in airports that are now helping create safe spaces for those moments where you can go into a family restroom and it doesn't look weird, or you can let somebody very discreetly know that your loved one has something going on. And these are the conversations we should have, because I should be able to go feeling comfortably over to the Staples and say, yeah, or I don't know if you've seen them, but the little cards that people can hand out of just like, hey, my loved one has, dementia and he looks totally normal, but he's needs extra time and we need a little bit of extra support. So all those things are wonderful, and I'm so glad that you have those resources. I'm definitely going to check them out. I know Dementia Friendly America also focuses a lot on that. It creates those alliances of like actual spaces. And it's a beautiful thing when we can embrace an illness instead of like hiding it away in a home. And how can we create opportunities for that? I think that's not where I focus on necessarily, but I think about it a lot.
Well, I think, that story about going to the bathroom in public, especially nowadays, with all the predators and everything out there and the older men and the younger girls. And it's those cards come in really handy for people. But again, sometimes you can hand them, people are like, I don't even know what dementia is, and so
Yeah.
that can throw them for a loop as well.
Yeah, the hidden disabilities program, I love seeing that grow. And like every time I do travel quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I see more and more and more of it, I still don't feel like people are using it enough, but it helps. And the more people use it in public spaces, then, we're creating a friendlier society for anybody with disabilities, not just for dementia.
Yeah, those sunflower lanyards that they have are wonderful. That can be worn as a lanyard, or it can be like a credit card tucked in your wallet. Those are absolutely fantastic. Because again, not all disabilities can you see, and when you mentioned, well, he looks normal. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things I hear from people with dementia is like, I'm so tired of people saying I look normal. What does normal look like? It's just, what is it? Just, I don't look scary to you. Is that what the deal is? I don't look at that different, but they know they're not clicking on all cylinders, and it becomes really offensive sometimes to people. as well. One of the products I want to mention to you, and I don't know if you're familiar with, is called Seni, Seni, and it's an incontinence product that is really
Oh,
high
the
quality. Yeah, and they
Mhm.
are wonderful because I've done a series of shows with them. In fact, we just launched one where they are now collaborating with Educate and Dementia Live to teach empathy and incontinence products and how to use them better in, let's say, skilled nursing and things like that. But their products are just exceptional. Like I said, I've done a series, and I've had people from private individuals as well as home care and communities just rave on how they don't leak. So it allows people to feel more comfortable going out. And, it gets down to a lot of times just getting the right size, or like, I didn't know you're supposed to fluff them up. I've never heard that. So they're more
Fluff
absorbent.
them up.
Fluff them up, and it like
I
that.
don't know about this.
And
I might have
makes
to go down
sense.
this rabbit hole with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Seni teaches people how to use the product, how to size, and they've got, kind of side guards and stuff for leakage. But I won't go. I'll put in that information here if people want. But that is life changing, and I can go story after story after story, and I've just heard a few of them compared to people's experiences. But it's amazing because when you're dealing with incontinence, I mean, how many times in the house it's like, oh, now I got to change the bed, I got to get them in the shower, I got to wash clothes, I mean, it's just all of that stuff. Or you don't want them to slip and fall if there's leakage. There's all of that stuff that goes on behind the scenes that can be really draining too.
And it's not a once in a while thing.
Mhm.
It's multiple times a day, and it is part of the journey. And there's so much concern around safety too, right?
Mhm.
You're not handling those things properly, it can really cause larger issues.
Exactly, exactly. And I will get into the clothing piece that kind of ties into that. In fact, why don't we do that right now if you want to explain the clothing that you develop to help people, because that can be tricky in terms of getting people undressed and redressed and all of that jazz.
Yeah, absolutely. So that one of the things we struggled with Dad, and the reason we felt like we couldn't care for him at home anymore was that transition to incontinence. And it
Mhm.
was some of the challenging behaviors that we had with him was his resistance to dressing. And so this jumpsuit, which zips up in the back instead of the front, really helps for when you have situations of undressing, or when you have situations of they're starting to use briefs, they're starting to transition to incontinence, and they don't know any better, and they put their hands in places or they take their clothes off, and it's uncomfortable. It's a really difficult transition. And so the way the clothing works is because it zips up in the back, they can see you're putting it on almost like a blanket in the front. And it's kind of, I think of it as like a hug. And when I first started the product, I called it like a bear hug, because my dad, I always said it was a bear hug. And it's a more dignified way to be able to care for them. They look good, they look clean. And also, you're no longer having to kind of go over the head, because now you're putting it on almost like a snuggie forward. And yeah, so the I'm not sure if this was something that you had to navigate, but there were times when we would come to the care home and Dad was completely naked, and there was number one and number two all over the room. Or in the middle of the night, he would find a corner and he could no longer make it all the way to the restroom, even with prompting. And not everybody needs this, right? But this is one of the hardest things in care, when you are struggling to be able to provide just the safety of your person going to the restroom in a safe way and in a dignified way. So I focused on making this jumpsuit based off of like all the feedback I got for caregivers of there's others on the market that, for example, they don't last you a day or two, like a week or two, because they're really poor quality. So I sourced like the best cotton that I could from alpacas in Peru and focused really on like making sure it's a loose, nice fit so that they're comfortable, they look dignified. And it's a lot easier for the caregiver to be able to dress their loved one. And those fights of like the wrestling with the head and like trying to jungle it all together um, are no longer there. And so it was a game changer for us. And I knew that that was where I wanted to start just because of how impactful it was for our family. Um, and I wanted to help other families that are in that terrible moment. I'll never forget how I felt trying to um, help our family through that moment. And that's why I made this jumpsuit.
It's important to have the adaptable clothing. And so many people don't even know it exists because you don't know what you don't know. And if no one's telling you, if there's not a resource like you or me, or, people think their doctors are going to tell them, and 90% of the doctors don't know this information either. And so where do you find this kind of stuff is critical, because it could be life changing in terms of attitude and stress on both sides. If somebody is fighting back and you're kind of wrestling with them, trying to power through it, like, we have to do this. This is a health issue. This is a safety issue. This is, we don't want a UTI, or we don't want bed sores or an infection, or, I mean, the list can go on, but that rational thought doesn't process, and they just don't understand what it is. And, to put that zipper in the back, you wouldn't think would be that big of a difference, but it is, because when you're, think back to if you ever had a child and you were trying to get them dressed, and as you're putting one sock on, they're taking the other one off, it's just kind of like that, except it's a bigger person and it's harder to manage that. And I think it's amazing that you came up with that. And was your, as far as your dad, how did he respond to having different clothes to wear?
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
I mean, it was night and day. I will say, when Dad started to need this clothing, he was no longer caring for himself. And really, it became about, how do we keep him comfortable? How do we keep him warm in facilities that are very cold? Naturally, there's a lot of ACs that are being used. And most importantly was the behaviors that his disease are driving, of, the aggression, or this need to take off his clothes, and the safety concerns that come with it was the highest priority at the moment. And it really helped us transition into that space of like, okay, I know that what he would want is, if we're coming into his room, that there isn't number 2 and number 1 everywhere. I never imagined that my dad would say like, yeah, totally cool, just let me, go to the restroom in the corner and like spread number 2 everywhere else. And the sense of, he was not aware or conscious at this point, at least, that he could communicate, right? I always believed that my dad was still there. But I know for a fact that for us as a family and for his caregivers, that it reduced this sense of just doom and anxiety of showing up and seeing Dad in a really undignified way, which would have never been how he would have been wanted to see. He never would have wanted people to have seen him in that state. And it brought a lot of comfort and safety for all of us. It also was a game changer when he was in the facilities, people knew that this was his clothing. It was like, okay, this is George's clothing and this is how we put it on. And we would train the caregivers of like, okay, we knew that for us, it was a huge safety thing also because when they're wrestling with their heads or their shoulders, right? Like it could be very physically intense to dress somebody who doesn't want to be dressed or who isn't mentally able to understand like what's going on. Even when you do like the nicest techniques, right? And we're his family, we're gonna take care of him. And if it takes us 5 hours to dress him, it takes us 5 hours to dress him. But in a care home, those caregivers are just moving through people and they have 5 minutes to dress you. They've got 10 minutes to give you a shower. And it's kind of this cycle. So making sure that he had his clothing that was going to be less stress for him overall gave us a lot of comfort.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can't imagine walking in and seeing my parent or my loved one with, smeared poop on the wall and furniture. And I mean, that would just be devastating to see that. And, staff, I'm sure it's frustrating to them because now they got to clean it all up. Even if someone doesn't know that they're doing it, they just know they're uncomfortable and they're trying to get in, they're trying to get comfortable. And, yeah, it's a very tough, and there's a lot of people dealing with this at home that don't tell anybody they're dealing with it because they're trying to preserve dignity in terms of how people perceive their loved one and are worried that that incident or that issue that might be, repeating is going to push people away even more. And nobody wants that. But we've got that emotional drain and the physical drain of going through all of that when a person doesn't understand. There's just so many people that don't understand, and it's hard to almost explain the depths of the grief and the frustration and the love and the whole big package going on there and the safety until you've been through it, because most of us can't imagine that.
It's one of those things that when you have to live through it, you really understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have to go through it and live it, it is absolutely heartbreaking and devastating. And you feel just completely defeated and at a loss. And, every single person that buys the product from me, I hug that product and I'm like, I understand the moment this family's navigating and I understand how this is going to help them. And it's also for people, for example, when they're bedridden, where everyone's just in a gown, right? And everyone's in a gown and they all look the same way. And we start to dehumanize kind of what this experience is like because these people with dementia can't advocate for themselves. They deserve dignity. They deserve respect. They deserve to look good even if they have behavioral challenges. And I think it's very easy to get defeated and frustrated and just stuck in the shame of also feeling like it's your burden, right? You're like, as a caregiver, you're like, I can do it and I can take care of my loved one. But sometimes the disease really just requires a little extra something to help us get through it. And whether it's, channels like yours or mine, where it's people who can come in and say, hey, listen, we've been through it and try this and it might help you, as you said, right? Yeah, because you're not in it alone. I think we should talk more about what it's like to be in these moments, because those are the real crisis moments where we need that intervention and we need it very quickly and effectively, or we can collapse as people and as caregivers because we feel like we failed our loved one. And you haven't, right? You're there, you're in the battle, you just need a little extra something to kind of get you through it, to make it easier. And there are these tools and these products that can facilitate the moment and make the daily care easier so that you're not having to fight your loved one every day when you're trying to dress them. So that's my hope, and that's my journey. That's what I'm out here doing. And I know there's a lot of us in that situation who could use the help.
Yeah, I know my dad did not have dementia. He had cancer and he ended up in an accident. He broke his arm. and they were staying with us, but he had a really hard time getting to the bathroom and getting there on time. And I think it was probably the third day in a row where he didn't make it to the bathroom on time. And I can put the little portable toilet in here so it'll be right next to you. No, he didn't need that because it was a whole dignity thing with him. He could make it. And he would pee on my wood floors in the bathroom, down the hall, in the tile, in the bathroom. And every day sometimes a couple times a day, I would have to clean that up, clean the bedding, get him in the shower. I mean, it was just exhausting. And by the third day, because I wasn't getting any sleep at all, because it's a big extra task that I don't think people understand how much time it takes to clean all that stuff up and to deal with that, or even and then you're trying to prevent it on top of it, and it still happens. And I just broke down one day and just cried to my dad. And I said, please, you've got to wear a brief, because he wouldn't do that either. So there's so many different scenarios that can happen out there, but we have to have these conversations, and there has to be dignity on both sides. And it has to be safe for everyone, because anybody can, slip in that urine as well, or the feces, all of that stuff. It's just, it's a big thing. So kudos for you for stepping up and trying to resolve, some of the problems there. Are there other types of difficult moments that you want to share with our audience that you kind of struggled with?
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Oh my goodness. I think the biggest crisis moments I had with Dad, a lot of them were really me coming to terms with what was happening, right? As someone in her early 20s, right? Just thinking about the notion, for example, of like my dad is not going to be at my wedding, right? And the reality of that, and the reality of grieving somebody who's here, but they're not, and they're not going to be. Those were absolutely some of the toughest ones, or even seeing someone else with their dad, or someone else who could focus entirely on being a student and continue their lives. And I never resented my dad or his illness. I always understood that this was a moment in time where I could show up for him, and I took it as a badge of honor. But I think similar to the incontinence moment where these small things just become so big. With Dad, he wandered, and that was beyond stressful. Dad also had bouts of insomnia. There were, I think, years where nobody in the house was getting any sleep. And really the impacts of that, and trying to navigate, how do I have a career and also be a caretaker for my dad and also have a life? How do I even think about having friends or socializing? So every step of the journey with Dad, I always felt like it was small things that would snowball into larger things until like it would hit a breaking point. And I think for caregivers, there's such a gap of awareness of when is that tipping point. and how is it escalating and how can we intervene earlier when that little thing that we're like, oh, that's fine. It's like not a big deal. That's just a behavior that is fine, right? Oh, he's like a little aggressive today, but that's fine. And oh, he doesn't want to eat today, but that's fine. And oh, he's kind of coughing while he eats, but that's fine. And then they snowball into the pneumonias, the UTIs, into these severe crisis moments where they end up in a hospital or you end up just emotionally distraught. I wish that we could learn as a community how to flag those things earlier and intervene quicker so that you don't have to get to the escalation point of you're breaking and they're breaking and something really terrible has happened. But we can acknowledge and accept that we're headed up this pattern and let's kind of stop it here. I don't know how you see that or view it.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. There's so many moments and there's so many emotions wrapped in each of those moments. And again, when you're exhausted, you're going to deal with each moment differently. But, you had mentioned a couple of things, like I have to realize my dad's not going to walk me down the aisle. I mean, those are things that people think of but they don't talk about them. And they're crushing because you always think your dad's going to walk you down the aisle. And why can't I have my dad? What do we do wrong that my dad can't be here for me for that? He's a good guy. That was one of my struggles with my mom is, I'm going to get emotional. She was a good person. Why? Why is this happening to her? And why can't I fix it? And none of us can fix it. We can only make it better. We can only appreciate the moments we've had and what's before us right now. Those are things we don't share with people. Anyways, I didn't. I just kept them to myself for the most part until I stepped into this. Then I talked about it. But, my family, they weren't around that much, so they didn't have those feelings. They didn't notice. They didn't see the things I saw because they chose not to. And that can be really disheartening and kind of throw you like feeling unstable or are you crazy? Because that's how they're looking at you. Like, I don't see that. I was just there. Yeah, for 15 frickin' minutes you were there. You're not seeing the whole picture of the realities of what's going on. And I think when you kind of lose your tribe that you've always trusted and felt you could rely on, that's difficult. Or when you mentioned, not being able to get together with friends. I mean, I just thought, I have no time. Why are you even asking? Don't you see I'm crazy busy trying to handle this situation?
Yeah, you don't feel like you can relate to other people around you. You can't. And we unfortunately had the same experience where actually, my dad's family was completely in denial through the whole thing. Through the whole entire thing. And, we didn't have financial means or resources. And when people that are supposed to show up, or you think these are the people that are supposed to show up and meet you where you're at, when they disappoint you, I mean, the heartbreak from that is like, not only do I have to deal with a dad that is ill, my family is navigating alone without the head of our family. We now need to financially provide for this illness and the family that he leaves behind. I have two younger siblings who were like 11 and 13 when my dad got diagnosed. So it was like really just chaos financially. But what got me through some of those moments was that people that I didn't expect to be able to empathize or understand what was happening started to show up. So my friends who I felt like I couldn't confide in because I was like, I'm a cool kid in college. Like, I don't want to talk about my dad who's dying, who's sick. But when I started to open up and share the things that I was experiencing, my concerns, my fears, like the reality of my situation, when I started to step into acceptance of what was happening, then people were able to step in for me who I wasn't expecting at all. And it was like the neighbor who brings the lasagna, this neighbor that I've never spoken to, right? And like that wasn't something that my aunts or my uncle on my dad's side could do. They couldn't show up for us. But this neighbor could, or this like random person who was just like, wow, you guys are like really in a tough situation. It's like, oh my goodness, thank you for understanding and for at least just empathizing. And so I think with vulnerability and sharing, the healing can start. Because when we're holding everything in so tightly and wound up, like, oh, nobody needs to know. And I don't even think it's about other people. I think so much of it is just us accepting ourselves and our moment in the pain that we have to then walk through. Then we can move into in a positive direction. What's interesting, I don't know if this happened to you, but I have a large family, right? I mentioned I have a mom and I have 5 siblings. Each person had such a different journey with dad's care, and we still do. And even after, right? And like just thinking about dementia and will that persist in our family is a conversation in our family that each person has a completely different reaction to. So it's not just like, okay, he passed and it's over. It's like we're still here wrestling with the grief and what does this mean for us? And is this going to hit our family again? And how do we take preventative measures for ourselves, knowing that we might be at risk? So I'm curious what that looks like for you too on a daily basis of like, I'm sure there's still things that you're processing and navigating in your own family.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Well, yeah, you can tell because I just broke down, but it's like grief doesn't go away, and those feelings, they're with you for life. And sometimes you just don't know what's going to trigger it. My mom said my grandma had it. But none of us really believed that because, she said she went nuts towards the end, but my grandma had cancer and was on morphine, and everybody kind of poo-pooed it to that because people weren't seeing it prior. And, back then, I mean, my mom's been gone over 40 years now. So, or I shouldn't say gone, she's been gone for over 10, but then the 30-year journey, and then her mom got it quite a bit before her. That's a long time ago, and they really weren't using that word Alzheimer's. But even when my mom thought she had Alzheimer's, people weren't using that word, and we never figured out where she found that because she wasn't like a Google person. That really wasn't a big thing, 40 years ago to go to the internet and Google. So, people have asked, would you get a DNA test? And I won't. Because I'm a firm believer that you can have the gene, but it might not mutate. I mean, I believe we all have cancer genes, and some of us get it and some of us don't. I've asked many doctors on that too, and they say they wouldn't as well. I have not had one doctor that I've ever asked that said that they would get a DNA test. But they do say that if you do get a DNA test, make sure you have the counseling part with it. I've known a couple of people who have gotten kind of the mail-in DNA test thinking maybe they had something else or just kind of curious, and then it came back and then they were like, oh my gosh, and they had no counseling and they really went into a deep depression and stuff. So, do I think about it? Yeah. I'm going to be 67 in a couple of months. Is my memory as good as it was?
67 young.
Yeah. But, my mom started having issues at 55. So even if I do get it, I feel like I'm ahead of the eight ball, compared to her.
Absolutely.
And I think you have to look at every day as a blessing. And so, yeah, I think about it, but I don't really worry about it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And I still want to, like, if I got diagnosed today or tomorrow, I would still want to be part of the movement for change.
Hmm.
I don't think I'd curl up in a ball. I just think I might get a little louder, in terms of what it's like, because I could talk from a real personal experience versus a care partner's experience, because they are different and things. So I don't know. Have you thought about doing a DNA, or anybody in your family?
Yeah. So I did do one of those. I didn't do the mail in, and I wasn't intending it for dementia, but
Mhm.
I worked in entertainment and they were doing a partnership with 23andMe.
Mhm.
And so I won like this free box of the 23andMe.
Uh-huh.
And that freaked me out, but I haven't had like a specific panel for
Mhm.
dementia done. We participated as a family, not everybody, because like I mentioned, each person has their own beliefs and their own process around it. But most of my family members, we participated in a study with a lab that is associated with UCSF, but they're based in Colombia. So it's a lab that we're very close to, like the woman that is leading FTD research down there. Our family is very close to her. Her name is Doctora Matallana, and she's just exceptional. I mean, this woman is going out to remote areas of the country and tracking down lineages of families to be able to research FTD and to find us a cure. And I've been with her on what she calls one of these brigades, and it's just incredible work. So, as a family, we participated in that, which was a series of blood tests and then like some questionnaires and stuff, but we haven't actually gotten the results. And I don't know that I would want necessarily to open the result, right? So, like, that's one of the beauties of like clinical trials is, or not trials, but like some of these research studies is you can participate and not necessarily get the answer. So I don't know. I think it's going to be there for me to answer eventually. I don't feel pressed to, but I feel very similarly to you, where come what may, I am very grateful that this disease does allow you the time to say goodbye. And that's one thing that why I've never been resentful about my dad's disease, despite the fact that like, we all stopped our lives for 15 years to care for him, is we got to say goodbye to him every single day. And yes, some days were extremely painful, but I can't sit here and be like, oh, my dad got a heart attack and I didn't get to say goodbye. It's like, no, we showed up for him. We were there. We were there in the hard moments. Did we feel like we got the best care for him? We never really felt that satisfaction of like, okay, we finally figured out how to get him exactly what he needs, but we tried our dang hardest. And I think that's something beautiful to this disease that other diseases don't give you. So I try to look at it from that lens, and similarly to you, I'm kind of prepared for whatever comes my way. And right now, my mission is just to help people who are on this path, and I'll do that as much as I can until I can't,
Yep.
and then we'll figure out what to do, right?
Yeah, I had a friend who was a doctor, and he ended up getting the disease. But way before that, he would always say, your genes aren't your destiny. There's so many things that can happen, with your genes. And so don't go down the rabbit hole with that. And I can still see him bouncing around. And both he and his wife ended up having dementia at the end. But, they were in their late 80s when that hit as well. So, I mean, they lived a really good long life. They would go out to dinner and they would have the waiter pick out their wine, and then they would try to test each other with which wine do you think it is, and they would do different things to kind of test their brain and kind of keep things going and stuff. And I just always found that fascinating that they didn't have a fear, because again, we can't control it. There are some things that we can do to try to prevent it. And I know there are people that saying that they can reverse it, and I'm still very skeptical personally on that.
Yeah.
But I do believe you can live a good life. But I think a lot of it has to do with attitude and your ability to adapt and appreciate what's before you, and not just focus on the negative, but appreciate what is still here. And like
Yeah.
you, I believe that soul is with them, and connections can be made till the very end. And even after, I know I'm still connected to my mom. I have no doubt about that. I think our communication changes, and I think more people are being open to a lot of that as well. But support services like yours, where you can get this adaptive clothing, plus you've got a lot of care tips for the care partner, for the person with the dementia. She identifies different crisis moments and crisis behaviors and crisis transitions and activities and connections. She has a section that talks about the different types of dementia and what kind of care is available to you. And again, just lots of great resources. And again, of course, you can always shop there as well. Her website is dementiaaide.com. And she's also on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest by that tag, which is nice and simple for people as well. Any last comments that you want to share with anybody, Anna?
No, I feel very fortunate that I can look back at the journey and see it so linearly. But for many of the people that are going to watch this and that you support, they're in it. They might not even have kind of started on that journey. And what I would love to just say to them is where you are is okay. And you don't need to feel wonderful about this disease. You don't need to feel at peace with any of it. This disease is, I think, one of the toughest challenges that anybody could ever face.
Mm-hmm.
And just lean on people like us who have navigated this and have done a lot of emotional work and a lot of physical labor and emotional labor to be able to have that change in mindset and framework, which takes time. It's not an overnight thing, right? This is a conversation between two people who have done a lot of thinking and reflecting and internal work on it. And so just meet yourself where you're at and reach out to people like us. And I'm always available. That's my thing with my community, right? I share tips and that kind of stuff, but that's really my whole point is like, if you message me, you send me a message, like I'm going to respond and I'm here. And if you want to call, and I give people my cell phone, I'm like, here's my cell phone. And they never call me, but I'm still waiting for that day when somebody's like, hey, I just need someone to vent to, right? And I think find your space in your village that can help support you in the moment where you're at, and use resources like Lori's, like Alzheimer's Speaks and Dementia Map to find what you need in this moment for the journey that you're on.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
That's good advice. We always talk about meeting the person with dementia where they're at, but we have to meet ourselves too. And we have to, like you had mentioned earlier about setting boundaries. Some things we're just not going to be able to do, and we need to pull in help or resources, and that's okay. Or, maybe you just need to cry. I know during the journey, I think I really hid my emotions, and I didn't let my frustration and my sadness out as much as I should have. I think it would have been more healthy for me to release that. But I didn't feel like there was a safe space or time to do that, which sounds really goofy, but that's how I felt. And so there are a lot of people like Anna and myself out there that want to hear your story and, know that all of your emotions are fair, they're equal, they're part of the process, they're part of everyday life, and they just get a little more intense sometimes when you're dealing with a chronic illness. That's normal. And I think society, we're always supposed to, be pretty and intact, and we don't feel like it's okay to do that. But I think it's very healthy. That's my personal opinion on that. So, but, thank you so much for all the work you're doing and for coming with us and sharing your journey and, with your dad, and then what's come of it. I mean, I find it amazing what people do when they're really in pain and they're struggling. I think most of us just want to make it better for the next guy. And if we keep doing that, we're going to elevate this support. We're going to talk about it more. It's going to be easier access for all. So again, thank you so much for being with us. In wrapping up, I always ask our audience to be a giver of hope. Like, click, and share. You don't know who's in your own sphere that needs this information. Because again, a lot of people still aren't able to talk about this publicly. But when they see little bits and pieces here and there, when the time is right, they'll reach out, and you can be part of that movement in terms of getting people comfortable to get the support they deserve. So thanks, everyone. Until next time. Bye now.
Attention seniors. Are you looking for a community that offers incredible benefits and stands up for your values? Look no further than AMAC. With an AMAC membership, you'll enjoy exclusive discounts on insurance, travel, dining, and shopping. Stay informed with 6 issues a year of our award-winning AMAC magazine, delivering trusted news and valuable insights. But that's not all. AMAC is committed to defending America's future by directly bringing the voices of our more than 2 million members to our elected officials. Join a community that cares about your needs and your values. For a limited time, we're offering a 1-year membership for only $1. Yes, just $1 for a year of incredible benefits and advocacy. Don't wait. Take advantage of this special offer and join AMAC today. Visit amac.us/join now. That's amac.us/join now.